Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is kind of impromptu, but at the same time it's something that I have thought about adding to this channel for a little while. I just wanted to kind of wait it out, see how things went, make sure I felt solid in maintenance and sustainability and all of that good stuff, and then we could chat. So I kind of feel good about where I'm at right now, and I have some time, so I figured why not pop on and start this video. Before I start, I'm gonna apologize in advance. If I'm like messing with my hair a lot, it's because I just cut it yesterday, and I don't know if you're like this, but when I have a fresh haircut, I have like a weird obsession with just being all up in it. So if it looks like I have head lice, it's really just because I cut my hair, okay? So I made a list of things that helped me with my weight loss journey and kind of just different actions that I put into place and different lifestyle changes I made and all of that. And I tried to be as, well, I was going to say I tried to be as specific as I could, and for some of these they are really broken down. Like I have like website recommendations, and I'll tell you guys about like books that I read and stuff like that. But at the same time, at least half of what's on this list is stuff that is really just common sense, and it's a matter of like changing habits. So while there are very specific things that worked for me, I hope to share the idea that it is very possible to make small, easy changes and have luck with weight loss. So before I get into the list, I'll just tell my story briefly for anybody who may be new to this channel or doesn't watch many of my videos about weight loss or anything like that. I haven't done too many, but in my vlogs it has been covered quite a bit. So last summer of 2018, I decided, actually it was more like in the springtime really, I had decided to kind of like do this whole lifestyle overhaul. Reason being, I had really felt myself slip into some bad habits from 2017 to 2018. Just a lot had gone on personally. I had changed jobs. There was a point where I was unemployed for a while. My dad got really sick. He had a stroke and was hospitalized and ended up having to get like open heart surgery. And then after all of that went down, Matthew and I moved in with him to help him out. So there was just a lot going on personally that stressed me out, and I unfortunately was dealing with like a decade-long struggle with binge eating. And what I have found looking back on it now is that at points in my life where things get really stressful or there's a lot of changes, I tend to rely on food and do a lot of emotional eating. And on top of that, it very quickly turns to just binge eating. And as a kid, I never did that. I never was a binge eater. I was definitely not like a healthy eater as a kid, but I never would eat such large quantities of food that it made me sick. And in my 20s, that's something I started to do, and I think a lot of it stemmed from restricting. So this kind of like feeds into all this as well. So 2 different times in my 20s, I lost 40 to 50 pounds very quickly, like doing like diets or being on like weight loss journeys or whatever. And I was not doing it properly. Like I said, I would lose the weight really fast. So I'd lose like 40 to 50 pounds in like 3 months, very quickly. And at the time I was thinking like, oh man, this is awesome. I'm doing great. Like I'm working out a lot and I'm watching what I eat. But really what it was me like, I don't want to say starving myself because it never got to that point at all. I was definitely eating every day, but I was extremely restrictive. I think I had very much, a glimmer of orthorexic tendencies that were really getting scary. I had like foods I could eat and foods I couldn't eat. And if it was not on that list, and the list of what I could eat was very short in both instances of me losing weight this way, I would literally eat like broth-based soups, eat simple lunch meat sandwiches with like no condiments on them, and cereal. Like that was like what I would live on almost exclusively during these times. And then if I did inevitably eat outside of that strict list, which you kind of end up having to, right? Unless you like hole yourself away and don't eat in front of other people or go out to eat or go to parties or whatever, you will break your little restrictions, which of course that's perfectly fine. I know that now. And we'll get into that. But at the time, I would like beat myself up anytime I would get fast food, anytime I would slip and like eat something greasy, anytime I ate a dessert or a pastry or anything like that. I would like think about it for a super long time. I would try to work out until it like was gone. Like full-blown emotional breakdowns over eating like a cupcake on a random day. So needless to say, it was not healthy dieting. And then what I would do is I would pick a day a week or sometimes even like an entire weekend, and I would just binge eat because I was restricting myself from all these things. And so on the weekend, I would call it a cheat day, you know, and in real life or like in a reasonable diet, I guess, a cheat day, I understand like the benefit of it in the sense that it allows you to eat things that you normally wouldn't eat, and then that way you don't feel so deprived, right? That's like the principle behind it. The problem for me is that I couldn't just take it as like, oh, it's my cheat day, I'm not going to worry so much. Like, I'm just going to kind of eat whatever, you know, no big deal. No, I would go all week, restrict, pick out my cheat day, and again, sometimes it'd be 2 days back to back, depending on what my schedule looked like, and I would plan it out so that all my meals were fast food. I had plenty of snacks. Like, I knew going into it that I was about to eat till I got sick. And I never purged anything. So I felt like I was okay. Like, I was like, well, I'm not throwing it back up or taking laxatives. Like, I'm not doing anything crazy like that, so it's fine. Like, it's just, I just get a little crazy on my cheat days. Looking back on it, so unhealthy, so dangerous. And because there was like emotion in it as well, I had mentioned at the beginning of this video, I do like a lot of emotional eating if I'm not careful as well. It just created like this huge shitstorm, for lack of a better phrase. And so both times that I lost weight like that in my 20s, within 2 years after having lost it, I gained it all back and then some. So, you know, lose weight takes about 3-4 months, whatever. Then gaining it back, honestly, each time took me much longer. It took me like up to a couple years to gain it back. So we're looking at least 5 years throughout the course of my 20s where I was just totally screwing up my system. Eating a ton, eating nothing, eating a ton, eating nothing, going like just back and forth, right? And then in the middle, the times when I wasn't concerned about my weight and was trying to be like body positive, I even took that to an extreme because I would go from being like, oh, I want to be super skinny to I don't give a shit what I look like, and I would just let completely go. And like, rather than having like, how do I want to say it? It's not that every day was I just like didn't care what I was eating. I was just eating garbage all the time, right? So that led me into my 30s, to be quite honest. And so in spring of 2018, after all these things had happened, I had changed jobs, all that stuff I talked about, like all these personal things were going on, and I was doing a ton of emotional eating. I was binging without the dieting involved. Like, it was just turning into like binges because it was making me feel better emotionally. And I just like woke up one day, and I think I know what happened. I went to the thrift store with my mom, and the thrift store we were at, they don't have like changing rooms in there, right? So we were just like holding stuff up to us to see if it would fit, and she bought me a couple tops that day, I remember, and I think they were large and extra large, and having held them up to me, I was like, oh, they'll be fine, they'll fit. Like, if it doesn't fit, it's just going to be a little tight, no big deal. And I got these clothes home, and I couldn't even get this extra large shirt like over my head past my shoulders. And I was like, oh man, like things have gotten a little dark. And like I mentioned, like there were a lot of points where I was really into body positivity and not worrying about my weight and not caring. But for some reason, when I tried to put that shirt on over my head and like it didn't fit and it was not even close, for some reason that was a weird reality check, because I knew I had gained weight over like several years' time. I had known that I wasn't thin. I had known that I was probably over 200 pounds, although at that time I hadn't weighed myself in literally years. But something about that just really like caused something to click. And I think the other thing was I was just physically not feeling well at this time. I was really depressed, but then I also was just getting sick all the time because of my diet and what I was eating. There were so many nights where I would go to sleep and wake up in the middle of the night, deathly ill. I could feel it like physically in my gallbladder. Times where I had to have a heating pad. My stomach hurt so bad from eating too much. I was like craving soda pop at like 8 in the morning. I mean, just crazy stuff. And so I think it finally just took its toll, and I was like, man, something has to change because I just don't feel good. And I, at that time, even though what caused all of this to click was a shirt not fitting, I honestly didn't have a weight loss goal at that point. I just knew I was more unhealthy than I probably had ever been in my life, and it needed to change. So that leads me to my little list. So there are some things that I began to implement. And the first thing that I did, like I do with everything else when the interest strikes me, is I began to read and do my research. So I really started from scratch. Like I began to, for the first time in my life, teach myself the bare bones of nutrition. What's a macronutrient? How many of them do we need every day? What does a balanced diet even mean? Like, is the food pyramid still a thing? Like, that stuff, that basic was what I was trying to, like, discover at this point. So I was going to the library and getting books about nutrition. I was getting just general, like, science textbooks. I was reading studies. I was like, researching different diets, but at the same time, I was trying to look at them as objectively as possible. So I researched the keto diet, I researched the vegan diet, I researched, what else? Paleo, which is very similar to keto. And I really tried to look at like the pros and cons of all of them. And initially, and here's the thing, I'm vegan now a year later, so some of you may watch this and hear that and be like, oh, well, isn't the vegan diet pretty restrictive and extreme? And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but yes, it can be, but something I learned early on in my research that I definitely applied to a vegan diet that I think is pretty easy to apply to a vegan diet is just to balance everything, right? And this is a debate like within the vegan community. There's a lot of people that are all about like high carb, low fat. And then, there's like debates about how much protein you need and all of this. But honestly, something I have found, distribute it as evenly as you can, right? I try to eat a little bit more carbs than I do fat and protein. But if I can keep it as close to 30-30-30, like 33-33-33 as far as percentages go between carbs, fats, and protein in my diet, I've found that to work. I mean, maybe that sounds like something not popular because it kind of just is so logical. But I have found that simple balance like that works. So reading and research is the first thing I did. There are a lot of books I was reading. And that's kind of what started my journey into veganism, is because even books that weren't straight up promoting a vegan diet were saying that like eating whole foods, plant-based is the healthiest thing you can do. Everything else was like, there were pros and cons to other food groups, but whole food plant-based was I've never read anything that says that's not a good route to take, right? So do your reading and research, even if it feels like super basic and super elementary. Like I said, I knew about calories in versus calories out, but I knew nothing about macronutrients or how to balance any of that, or what was important in regards to each of the nutrients and any of that stuff. So start simple, do a Google search, literally like just Wikipedia, like just to get basic information. What is a calorie? How does it work? How do calories get burned? How do calories get stored? Those are things that I feel like a lot of people don't know or think about, and it's kind of a bummer to me, but yeah. So anyway, reading and research. The other thing, and I'm looking at the list to make sure I don't miss anything. I did put on here balance your macros, so that's kind of what I was just talking about with the macronutrients. There's a website that I discovered in all of my research, and it is called tdeecalculator.net. I will leave a link below in this video to the calculator so you can try it out for yourself, but basically they have you input your age, your height, your weight, your gender, and then your activity level. So you let them know, you can put in there like how often you exercise or whatever per week. And then they will show you not only how many calories you need to eat a day to maintain your weight, to lose weight, and or to gain muscle. So they give you all three of those options for calories. They also break down your macronutrients, and you can go in there and toy with it. So if you're somebody that eats, like I just was talking about, high carb, low fat, you can go in there and adjust your carbohydrate goals and lower your fat intake, and kind of tweak it how you want, so that when you enter food in, you can kind of see where you're sitting. The other thing is there's apps. So there's Chronometer, there's MyFitnessPal. Those are like two I can think of right off the top of my head. Those apps also take into account, there's always like this little pie chart with the macronutrients, and they will show you as you enter food in where you're sitting with macros. Now, one thing I want to talk about while we're talking about these apps and this TDEE calculator and everything is to be careful with those. I just shared with you guys that I had experienced some issues as far as like getting too restrictive and having these orthorexic tendencies. You really need to be careful with calculators and tracking any of your food if you have tendencies like I do, because it's a very slippery slope between just casually checking whether or not you're on track and becoming obsessive. So I actually do not use any apps or food calculators anymore on a regular basis at all. For the first probably 2 or 3 months, especially once I started eating plant-based, I was entering my food into MyFitnessPal. Now, 2 reasons for that. One is because I was actively losing weight at that point in time, so I wanted to make sure I was on track. 2, I wanted to make sure I was eating enough. Because I have a history of restriction in my diets, I wanted to make sure that I did it this time in a way that's sustainable, healthy, and reasonable. So, whereas years ago, I would have and did use MyFitnessPal as a way to keep myself in check and make sure I didn't eat too many calories, this time around, I used it as a tool to make sure I was eating enough. So in my 20s, when I was using MyFitnessPal, and I don't even know if it was an app at that point, I think it might have just been like a website, I would get excited if I ended my day and I only ate like 1,100 calories. I'd be like, oh, that's awesome, because now I ate even less. I'm going to lose more weight. That's not the right idea, guys. That is like such a dangerous and unhealthy attitude to have. And so, again, this time around, if I pulled open MyFitnessPal and I only ate 1,100 calories that day, I'd be like, damn, I need to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something, because I'm like borderline starving myself here. I just knew at that point how important it was to eat enough. And my number one goal was to just be healthier. Yes, the added bonus was losing some weight, but the way I started this all was just about the way I felt inside, and so I think that really helped me to stay reasonable, I guess. So yeah, there's plenty of tools for you to help track. What I do now, especially when I first went fully vegan, which was a few months ago, I was using Chronometer like once a week, just punching in, and I really tried to do it with things that I ate on a regular basis. Like I eat a lot of pinto beans and rice, or I'll make like a batch of baked potatoes and meal prep that out amongst different things. So I was trying to put in meals that were like typical for me, and the reason I used Chronometer at that time was just to make sure I was getting all my nutrients in, especially if you decide that you want to follow something like a vegan diet, or let's say you go keto, whatever. You still want to make sure that you are nourishing yourself as far as like vitamin C, calcium, all of that stuff, like your micronutrients. You want to make sure that you're getting everything you need. For me, when I went vegan, I wanted to make sure I did it as healthfully as possible. And of course, I'm not perfect. I do not eat whole food, plant-based all the time. I love my Beyond Burgers. I love my Gardein beefless tips. I love Daiya cheese. Like, I'm not going to sit here and act like I eat freaking acai bowls all the time. That's not the case at all. However, I do want to make sure that generally speaking, I'm eating a nice, balanced, healthy diet. So that's where the apps come in. So like I said, I'll leave the link for the TDEE calculator, because for me, that one really helped me just figure out what my goals were. I know now a lot of people use Chronometer, so I'll link that as well below. But those are like the two big ones. So there is that. And here's where we're getting more into like the platitudes and like the general information, right? This almost feels useless to say this because it sounds so common sense, but as somebody who didn't learn properly about nutrition till I took it upon myself in my mid-30s, I feel like maybe this will be useful for some people. So the biggest things, honestly, that helped me to lose weight, two things. One is to just implement things a little bit at a time. Do not bite off more than you can chew, especially if you want to maintain your weight loss. Now, it's only been about 13 or 14 months for me since I started this journey. So obviously, I still have a lot to prove to myself in terms of whether or not I can keep this weight off. However, I can confidently say that I feel so much better about it this time around than the times in the past that I have done anything like this. And the reason for that is because, number one, I didn't have a crazy goal at the beginning, like I said, right? When I was in my 20s and I was losing weight, it was 100% to fit in size 4 jeans. Like I had like a very specific weight loss goal. I wanted to look a certain way, I wanted to wear certain clothes, like that's what it was all about. This time around, my goal was just to get healthy, to feel healthy, to genuinely begin to care for myself more. So I think that definitely, that mindset has really helped me in terms of maintaining this, because it still is super important to me to be as healthy as possible. The second thing is I know where I've screwed up in the past. I was going to say the F word, but I'm trying to calm down a little bit on that, you guys. So I've screwed up a lot in the past, and I see what that has done to me both mentally and physically, and I just don't want, it was very important to me to not get back to that place again, because it was very dark, and I'm only like kind of now able to talk about it openly with people. So I just didn't want to go there again with that. And the other thing is, because I had done proper research, I knew, or I realized very quickly this time around, that the slower I lost weight, the easier it would be to maintain all of the changes that I made in order to lose the weight in the first place, right? So before, like I had said at the beginning of this video, my goal was always like, how quick can I get skinny? And if I do it fast enough, then I'll really be a boss, you know? Like it was like the finish line I had to be the first one there. This time around, I did not want to lose weight fast at all. I was almost scared to lose weight quickly. So I have lost since May of 2018. Today is August 8th, 2019. So over that span of time, I have lost just over 50 pounds. So the first time I weighed myself last spring, summer, I don't remember exactly when it was, but I do remember that the first time I weighed myself, I came in at 209 pounds, I want to say. And actually, when I weighed myself this morning, it was at like 159.2 or something. So it's like almost exactly 50 pounds of weight loss, but over the course of a year. By the end of the summer, I had lost maybe 15 pounds, maybe 15 pounds. It might have even been closer to like 10. Then from like fall until Christmas, I lost another maybe 10 or 15 pounds. So from May until this past March, so what's that, 10 months, I had lost about 30 pounds. So it took me just under a year to lose 30 pounds. And then I lost 20 more. And the only reason I lost 20 more, I think, or the main two reasons are, one, I started yoga teacher training. And so my physical activity totally ramped up from what it was before. So I think that made a huge difference. And also, like, fat was turning to muscle, and like things were just changing in general with my body when I started teacher training, because like I said, I was going from practicing yoga 30 minutes a day 3 to 4 times a week to 5 to 6 days a week practicing anywhere between 30 and 75 minutes. So it just totally, that like will change anyone's figure, I think. No, I could have been eating Big Macs the whole time and I still probably would have lost weight. So yoga was a big one, or teacher training, I should say. The second thing is that I did finally go vegan. So for the first probably 11 of this 14 months of weight loss, I was eating vegetarian, but I was still eating a lot of cheese pizza, a lot of eggs, or when I could. Eggs make me really sick, but I was still eating them. But yeah, so after about 6 months, I totally cooled out with the eggs because they were making me so sick that I was just like, can't do this anymore. But cheese, I kept around. I really ate a lot of pizza and things like that just because it was easy to go pick up a frozen pizza, run to Little Caesars, whatever. But when I finally went vegan, which was the beginning of June, so again, this is only like my 3rd month of fully vegan eating, but I've lost like an additional 10 pounds just from that. So yeah, the yoga and the veganism have definitely knocked off that last like 15 to 20 pounds. But here's the thing. Before I lost that additional 20 pounds, I was fully happy. I was fine with the 30 pounds of weight loss. Like, I could have done that and been in good shape. When I got down to like 170, I was like, man, this is cool. I feel good. I feel like this is something I could sustain for a long time. I feel like I'm eating enough. I feel healthy. I feel strong. My sleep patterns are better than they've ever been. And so that additional weight loss is almost, I don't want to say I didn't want to lose it, but like I definitely did not try to lose it. And I made very sure that when it was happening that I was still continuing to eat enough. About once a month, I go on to TDEE calculator, plug in my updated numbers, and make sure that I know what I need to be eating enough. So, yeah. That's all I had on my list. Oh, one more thing. Move a little bit each day. I'm like reading what I wrote. So what I put on here, and I'm kind of going back to what I was just talking about with the sustainability and moderation and all of that and eating enough, is I put on here, little changes add up and are more sustainable. Large, sweeping, dramatic alterations may not be sustainable despite fast results. So it's kind of the whole slow and steady wins the race mentality. Any little thing you can change will make a difference. When I first started out with this last spring, I was eating literally almost every single meal from a fast food place. So there was that. I was not drinking I was drinking almost exclusively Mountain Dew. I was not satisfied after dinner unless I had some kind of dessert, so cookies or donuts, or I would bake a cake or get brownies. Like, I couldn't even eat dinner if I didn't have some type of fatty, sugary dessert. I was not exercising. I was doing yoga, but my yoga practice was very much more of like a spiritual one and very gentle, lots of seated poses. Definitely never messed with vinyasa when I was fat. I just I loved yoga, and I was getting more flexible and open, but it wasn't causing me to lose weight because it was the only physical activity I was doing. It was pretty minimal, and I was not eating well. So yeah. There were just a lot of little things that I changed, and I did it one piece at a time. I did not go even vegetarian right away. I started out by just eating a little bit less red meat, right? So I was switching over to like turkey burgers instead of regular beef burgers. Trying to be careful eating a little bit less like bready things or things that were deep fried. Eating fast food like once a week rather than once or twice a day. Same thing with like desserts, like saving them for once or twice a week versus every single day. Little changes, and that stuff all worked. And as the little changes start to produce results, you'll find, hopefully, that it makes it easier to kind of like piggyback from there. So, like, one of my first things that I did right away was I quit drinking pop. Like, I think I even made that decision before I made the decision to like change what I was eating, because it was just making me feel so crappy to like always have that sugary taste in my mouth and like wake up craving. I would literally wake up in the middle of the night and all I would want is Mountain Dew, and you bet your little bottom dollar I was going in the refrigerator at 2 a.m. cracking open a Mountain Dew and like swigging it straight from the 2-liter and then going back to bed. So like that's where your girl started out. But yeah, the first thing I did was cut that out, and I switched over to sparkling water. And I don't think I changed anything else at all until like 2 months after I had stopped drinking soda. Then I cut back on the fast food. Did that for a couple months. Then I went vegetarian. Cut back on that. Then I started to slowly go more plant. So like little by little, I made changes. Trust that you will see the difference in little changes, and not only that, it'll be way easier for you to get used to the changes you're making rather than like bombarding yourself at once with all these different things that you're not used to. Anyway, I'm rambling like hard here. I've been talking for half an hour already, so I promise I'm almost done. But the last thing, it's actually the second thing I wrote on here, but the last thing I'll talk about is to move a little bit every day. And I've kind of talked about this just naturally in this conversation we've been having, but it's the best advice, and this has worked for me every time I've lost weight, really. I've never done much more than just walked to lose weight. Now, of course, I have yoga in my life, so that's like become a whole different thing, but you honestly, you guys, can really do yourself some good by just taking like a 15 or 20 minute walk every day, or like a few times a week. Again, start slow. For me, when I started being active again, I was going for a walk twice a week, and I was doing yoga twice a week. And at that time, I was already used to doing yoga, so it was just adding that little bit of walking. And I would walk maybe a mile, maybe. There was this stop sign around the corner from our house, and when I first started, I would literally walk to the stop sign and back. It took me like 15 minutes altogether. But you start slow that way, and it builds and it builds and it builds. And when I say move a little every day, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a walk. I know a lot of us are busy. I personally am. So something that's really helped me is to just think about where you can add footsteps in your day where you wouldn't otherwise. And it can be like through the course of what you're already doing. So, and this is like not anything revolutionary, you guys. This is, you can look and find this advice everywhere, but it truly works. Parking a little bit further away when you go to the grocery store, using stairs instead of an elevator. For me, I like to just randomly like clean stuff around the house. So I'll do a couple extra loads of laundry if I ever have time. Or I'll go through and like vacuum the whole house randomly if it doesn't need it necessarily. Or deciding to like deep clean the kitchen. Like any little thing that you do to move is going to help. Like I said, and like for me, I use walking because where I live, my house is less than a mile from everything in town. So I'm less than a mile from the local convenience store. I'm less than a mile from the pizza place. I'm less than a mile from, I'm about a mile from the library. I work only a mile from where I live. So everything is really close, and I was not walking anywhere. It literally takes me 15 minutes to get from my house to like the main hub of our downtown area, and I was driving my car. And so that's another little change I started to make, is like, oh, isn't it nice outside? Well, instead of driving to the library, let me walk there. And like, yes, it takes a little longer, but you'll find, hopefully, that those little things start to build, and maybe you enjoy them. I love walking, and I always forget about it until I start doing it again. When I get in my modes of being lazy Lucy and like not wanting to get out of bed ever, I'll tell myself like, oh, fuck exercise. It's terrible. It doesn't make you feel good. It's awful. I just want to sit in bed and eat donuts all day. And then I take a walk and I'm like, oh man, I feel so happy and refreshed, and like hearing the birds sing and the wind blow through the trees. Like, it sounds like such a hippy dippy thing to say, but like that really does make you feel good. And so now that I'm back in that mode, and I've been in that mode for so long, you guys know like half of my vlogging gets done when I'm walking out and about. I'm obsessed with it. So you just have to kind of like create new habits for yourself, and it happens really slowly. You're not going to go from being a couch potato to like running 5 miles a day every day. So, and maybe you do, but in my experience, that stuff like that is what's caused me to burn out and just give up on living healthfully. So yeah, I think that's everything. This is super long, you guys. I don't even know if I'm going to post this. It's so long. But I really do think a lot of this is helpful, and to me it's really important because as somebody who has listened to a lot of like rhetoric that supports fad dieting and restrictive dieting, and like have been really susceptible to these dangerous messages with regards to eating and dieting and everything, I wanted to make a video that talked about kind of like ways that you can get around that and still live healthy and still make good choices, but also do it in moderation. So that's all I got for you guys. Hopefully you didn't die listening to this because it was so long. If you made it all the way through, I'm really proud of you. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys soon. Love you. Bye.